episode of the Balanced Growth Show. I am your host, Dr. Travis Perry. Today, we are going to be talking a little bit about this concept of hustle. Now, don't get me wrong, hustle is incredibly important. I remember as a kid running a paper route. I was refereeing on Saturdays for some extra cash after my soccer games. I was doing yard work for grandparents. I was doing it all, right? And I was hustling. Hustle's important. Lately, though, I've seen a lot of influencers talking about this, and quite honestly, their opinions vary from you absolutely need to hustle, you need to grind until you make it. You need to sleep on the floor underneath your desk until you've hit your first million. Well, I'm here to tell you that there are some major flaws in this thinking. One being you. If you don't take care of yourself, you're likely to burn out and, quite honestly, ruin those relationship ties that you have with your own spouse, family, friends, people that you love. So let's talk about how this affects your health. I know personally that when you are in the hustle and the grind, if you're not making time to work out at the gym, to eat right, it catches up to you fast. Now, as an 18-year-old kid, I could eat anything. I was exercising all the time, playing sports and whatnot. But about age 25, and maybe earlier for women, but for men, age 25, we tend to hit our peak and stuff happens. We get overweight. We get down. And quite honestly, this leads sometimes to even depression, mental health problems. The list goes on. So, what do we do about this? Well, I first think we need to understand that this myth of hustle. Quite honestly, something I outline in my book, Achieving Balance, is this first myth about doing it all and the workaholic trap. Now, the workaholic trap is something that I think entrepreneurs, business owners who are starting out tend to fall into because they see all these influencers and they see how good they're doing and how influencer, they are to their own, individuals they're out influencing their ideal clients. And they think, gee, I've got to have it like that. So I've got to look like I'm doing everything. And trust me, as we know, as we delegate as business owners, we don't do everything. There's no way. We're running a team. We have members, employees on our teams that are doing other things for us. So it appears we're doing more than we really are. So number one, I think the hustle is a myth if we are thinking we're 24/7, 90 hours a week, as Elon Musk sometimes talks about. So what do we do instead? Well, I think we need to understand that it is a trap. Workaholism is an addiction. It's in the DSM 5. Psychiatrists use this as a diagnosis for individuals who suffer from workaholism. We're going to be talking about later about some of the how-tos. So stick around, what we can do to get out of it. But I will tell you this, there exists three individuals inside the workaholic trap. The do-it-all, the person who tries to do everything all at once and can't seem to really accomplish much. This tends to lead to burnout. It tends to lead to all other things we were talking about earlier. Two, there's the productive workaholic, someone who learns how to use productivity very well, actually. They're very proficient in what they do. They're very productive, but they don't have any boundaries. They let it sort of rule them. And the third character in this workaholic trap is a personal developer, an individual who struggles maybe with do it all, with productive, workaholism, but has figured out how to get past it. And they have done it on their own. Maybe they've had coaching, they've had help, but they don't really have any accountability and they don't work with their family, don't have support with their spouse and family to help them. So at any moment, they could actually fall back, as we call it, falling back off the wagon, right? Fall back down the workaholic trap. I believe the mentality is the struggle. I think we can work hard, be productive at work. And I believe that afterwards, having fun hobbies, interests, people that you relate with, family, working on your health, making time for these important priorities in your life allows you to get things done at work. I like to relate it to this. People often ask me, well, Travis, you take 16 weeks off a year. How in the world do you do that? How do you continue to grow your business and, really be gone 4 months out of the year? Well, to be clear, it's not 4 months at a time. I've done max 32 days, I think, is the longest I've done. And it's a very freeing experience. I talk about it in another podcast where we discuss the pros and cons to having a sabbatical or a long-term vacation, which is fantastic. It's really a blessing. However, I take vacations here and there with my family. I may take a week or two off, weekend vacations. I don't work Fridays. So our lifestyle is very flexible and open. We homeschool our children. So this allows me to take my kids with me when I go speak or when I'm on a work-related trip. I can take my spouse. These things are, very important. So this flexibility is really important. But think about this. The last time that you went on a vacation, the last time that you had to leave town and you were really trying to not, be at work on your email or on your laptop or iPad while you were away, what you end up doing the days before leading up to that vacation, you're super productive, right? You tend to get those things done that need to get done. Why? Because it has a deadline. All right. And when you're gone, you're gone. You delegate, you let go. And if you don't, you're struggling with the workaholic trap, like we talked about. But afterwards, when you return, right, there may be some pileup, there may be some things to get back to. But if you've structured it well, then you're able really to have that flexibility and come back renewed and come back excited about life. I think that every day is like a vacation. You show up to work, you get what you need to get done, and afterwards, you have this break. It's needed. You need it. Your family needs it. You need to have some mental space to separate from work so you can come back and hit it hard. Later on in the show, I'm going to talk about some how-to, some 3 ways that you can actually make that happen every single day. Work the hours that you want to, grow your businesses like the guests that I'm going to introduce to you today. We have some very special guests, and I'm going to actually let them introduce themselves. We have Stephanie Shirley and Rick Madison. Stephanie, welcome to the show. Thank you for being on the Balanced Growth Show today with us.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here. So I'll just give a really brief overview of who I am, and we'll kind of let the conversation hopefully bring out some other elements of my entrepreneurial journey. So every entrepreneurial journey is unique. I started mine when I was just 23 years old. I graduated from college. I went into the political world. I thought that maybe I wanted to be a lobbyist or a political activist or something of that nature. And within 6 months, I realized that my real passion was the public relations work that I was doing on the side, kind of as a freelancer. So I had to make the switch pretty early on, the entrepreneurial leap, to say, I'm going to give this a go. Before I have any really heavy responsibilities, my student loans hadn't even come due yet. And I left what many would consider a dream job and went full force into turning my freelance business into now 12 years of my own public relations firm. So there's many, many other pieces that will come out, I'm sure, in my conversation today. But I've been an entrepreneur for a while, longer than I've been anything else. I make the joke that I'm pretty much unemployable at this point because I'm so used to working for myself and kind of living that very flexible schedule that you described.
I love it. Thank you for being on the show today, Stephanie. And I appreciate your energy and your drive and your willingness to share. Rick, love to introduce you as well. Tell us a little bit about your background, yourself, and for the listeners.
Well, I'll start with a story about my dad. He once asked me, he goes, Rick, when you get up in the morning, what happens next? Because he wasn't really sure what I did. And that's by my own design. I've dabbled, as some might say. I have a land development company, podcast host. I run a marketing agency. I'm also a philanthropist, so I delve into fundraising activities. dad, husband, and partner in a startup that was recently on national TV on Dragon's Den. So it's just a whole bunch of different things, but with my short attention span, I do a bunch of different things. I teach a college class in marketing and business, and I enjoy every interest that I get to do. So this is such a pleasure being on your show, Travis, and I hope to add to the conversation.
Absolutely. I've only heard of Dragon's Den because of a guy named Russell Brunson. I follow his marketing for a while now, and he says that, that's a fantastic show. Congratulations on being there. And I'm going to have to look it up. I'm going to have to see how that went and watch your presentation there. Fantastic. Well, it's nice to have you both on here. Having a quick bio and little background on you allows me to ask a few questions. I first want to start with, Stephanie, and really ask you, how did you grow this firm? I know you made the entrepreneurial leap, and that's hard, right? As we're talking about hustles, we're talking about not sleeping under the desk, which, by the way, full disclosure, I have a stand-up desk, and I could, if I wanted to, have a little cot, built underneath. But that's that's the struggle I think that some of us face, is like wanting to work all the time, never turning it off. Talk to me about how you're able to grow your business, and what's really worked for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started out, I thought that the best way to scale, eventually I would want to hire employees. I would maybe want to have a physical office location. That would be the direction that I felt a lot of pressure to go. Fortunately, I wisened up a couple years later and figured out that there is no one right way to scale your business, but there are plenty of wrong ones, right? So I had to learn early to, first and foremost, get to know my personality. I'm a solopreneur. I do not have employees. As I mentioned, over a decade in business, I've never needed to. So I learned that it didn't fit my personality or my leadership style to have employees, to have a physical office location. I was able to scale in a lot of other ways by expanding my vendor network, by becoming more efficient with my time, more selective with my projects, of course, charging more. So I've become really passionate about letting other people know to not feel the same pressure that you have to follow a certain model for your business. Running a public relations firm doesn't mean you have to have employees. Now more than ever, because of COVID, we've learned to do things virtually. And there's a lot of benefits to being a solopreneur. So took a little bit of a different path there, but really found success when I realized what was true to my personality type and what I could do well. And I stopped trying to fit the mold of what I saw other people around me doing.
Oh, well said. This is a struggle for most. Like, hey, there's all these ways to grow. There's all these ways to scale. What do you do first, right? How do you make this happen? And the fact that you found your stride, so to speak, is very inspiring. What would you say to those who are struggling to figure out how to find where their stride might be?
Absolutely. So I think one of the biggest struggles, and I know it's a word that's been made popular in a lot of different ways, is imposter syndrome. As entrepreneurs, it can sneak up on you. It can be early in your career. It can be many, many years into it, where you'll have that moment where you're like, am I really good at what I do? Am I really making a difference? Is this where I'm being called to work right now? So first and foremost, I think it's develop and invest in understanding your identity. Where are you sourcing your value? And you might find that those are coming from unhealthy ways. I know I've been there as an entrepreneur where I was putting too much value on the certain brands I work with, the clientele, the number of people I work with, and it was causing an imbalance. So I had to, whenever I feel that, I have to revisit and say, wait, where am I finding my value in what I'm doing? And is that really aligning with my priorities? So you mentioned the word hustle, and I heard a really wise friend share with me. She's like, throw the word hustle away. We really need to replace that with align. And we need to align ourselves with what we're doing and if they match our priorities, our values, and what we want out of life.
The book I wrote, Achieving Balance, I had so many people say, hey, this isn't a book on time management. This is a book on values and priority management. And you nailed it. Because I think when you're out of alignment of your values, you feel imbalanced. And that's what we've seen interviewing so many other entrepreneurs. So I appreciate that, Stephanie, for explaining that. Rick, let's talk to you. You're doing a few things. You've got your fingers in a few things out there, but let's kind of bring it back to some of the beginning days as you began one or two of your businesses out there. Talk to us about what was some of your success. What were some of the ways that you were able to grow and scale your business?
Well, I think it comes back to what you're working. And I mean, for me, a lot of people do. You were talking about it off the top, Travis, about how people spend a lot of time working. If I'm going to sit in my office, I'm sitting in my office right now, I have a list of things that I want to get done in a certain amount of time. And I actually mentor a lot of my marketing and business students and say, what do you want to accomplish? How do you want to get there? And I'm sorry, one of those goal people, but the people that slog away for 12, 15 hours, I mean, I cannot understand how you can't work smarter, work more efficiently. And in my life, connections are really important. So I have a land development company, which I mentioned, and I partner with some really intelligent people, smarter than I am, that know how to help me get to where I need to go, going back to that goals. And I think that's the key in all of this is, for me, my personal experience versus Stephanie is really work on these relationships, really work on these connections, work with like-minded people, and surround yourself with great people that really are ambitious and push you to greater heights. And I think I totally respect and love the people that have come into my life that have made me successful. They believed in me. I followed a path, and here we are.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I think one of the big issues that a lot of business owners struggle with is the D word, delegation, right? Being able to delegate to a team, to another individual. There's a lot of fear there of, well, I do it so well, and if I let someone else do it, and there's a lot of issues with training and things like that. But you've done this well. What would be a kernel of wisdom, some advice you would give to others who may be struggling with delegation? What would you tell them?
Well, the key is not abdication, because abdication is I tell you, here's what I want to see done, and then I don't check in on you. I don't give you any kind of timelines or critical path. And that's where a lot of systems fall down. So I prefer delegation, which is I tell you exactly what I want done within a certain timeline. I'm going to check in. I'm going to support you. I'm going to give you all the tools and resources necessary. And then we're going to celebrate the wins when we get the incremental wins. And I think a lot of times in a lot of workplaces I work with, they just don't check back in. And I think a lot of people get disenfranchised by that because they're like, well, I thought this was important to you. So I think delegation versus abdication.
Yeah, well said. I like that. And yeah, it doesn't matter if you're having a solo business, you have multiple businesses and you're delegating to, hundreds of employees. I think the idea, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stephanie, as well. I mean, you can be a solo, but you can have virtual assistants. You have contractors you work with, no doubt, that are helping you do these things. I remember when I first started this was a podcast, and I was doing it all on my own. I was editing, I was creating, and sending it out, blasting on emails. Now I'm so glad that I can delegate this. And as soon as this is done, my editing team will turn this to a couple of podcasts. My marketing team will turn this into plugs on social, and off it goes. And I don't have to worry about it, right? I don't have to be that guy. I can show up and know what I know and let other people do what they do best. So thank you for that. Thank Stephanie and Rick for those comments. I'm going to take this a little bit different direction. We're going to talk about some struggles maybe that you've had. And, this is, like I mentioned, this is kind of like group therapy. Like, let's talk about what have you struggled with? What have you seen and how? And be specific with this, because I think people need to know, right? People want to know, what are successful people still struggling with? Because we still have, blood pumping through our veins. We're still mortals. We still struggle with things. I'm balanced man, but I still struggle with balance every day. Like, it is a constant battle. Let's start with you, Stephanie. What would you say, as you've been growing your business, trying to, scale it, grow it, that you have maybe been struggling with on the balance side?
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of a fun fact, and you probably heard the phrase before, shoemakers, children have no shoes. Oftentimes, a public relations professional doesn't do a lot of PR for herself. So, I do fly below the radar. I'm usually the man behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz, where I'm doing these great things for my clients. I'm getting them awards, I'm getting them media attention. I'm shining a light on their business, and I'm very rightfully taking a step back. I had a great professor once tell me if I wanted a byline, I should go into journalism, not PR. And I took that to heart. I didn't want a byline. I didn't want the spotlight on me. But the flip side of that is when you fly below the radar, there's a lot of pros to it. There's also cons. And that can be when you want that spotlight, when you want that recognition shown on you every so often, it's not easy to manufacture that on the spot. The people who do it well are usually, banging the drum about themselves pretty consistently. And so I've known from time to time, I've definitely been below the radar. I've not gotten many awards, honors, recognitions. I've kind of waited for them to find me. But I will tell you that when you are patient and humble and you do consistent good work, the right recognition will find you. And it means so much more than maybe the things that you're trying to manufacture for yourself. So that's been a recent kind of thing I've been grappling with is the balancing how much I want to talk about my success that I've now achieved and be like, well, no, hey, look at me. I'm doing this great thing, the millionaire next door type of scenario. And also coming back to my identity and saying, why do I feel like I need other people to recognize that? It shouldn't change my self-worth. It shouldn't change what I do every day and my passion for it. So kind of like you said, Travis, you have to keep reminding yourself, even the expert can say, I need to revisit my own words. I need to take my own medicine again because I can become off balance from time to time.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. I mean, as a PR person, the value of self promotion and, discussing with your audiences and getting the marketing words out there. It's super important, right? You've got to bang that drum. However, there maybe is a balance here between, staying true to yourself, your humility. I love the Millionaire Next Door. I love the concept. It resonates with my values when it comes to money and growing your business. As a financial advisor, as a young financial advisor, a lot of, oh, you're young, you're 22. And well, yeah, but I've got licenses, I've got degrees, but okay, fine. Here's a book. These guys are PhDs. They studied millionaires. Here are the principles. I'm just going to be the guy that's going to help you, guide through these process. So I love that concept. But I also want to kind of follow up too. I think you mentioned, Stephanie, before, this idea of imposter syndrome, right? Was that you that brought that up? So you brought up this idea of imposter syndrome, and yet, as a PR person helping individuals with self-promotion, there is a direct conflict if we're not careful, right, in the subconscious here. I'm going, well, I want to tell the world, yet maybe I'm not there yet. Talk to me about how you've helped maybe your clients deal with that, because I think that's important to balance. I think that's important to, the work balance that we're doing in order to stay focused on beating that drum.
Absolutely. And I've worked with clients all across that exact spectrum you're describing. Ones where I've even had to rein them in from being too far the other way. So I have the very humble, the please don't talk about me, I'm not ready to talk about my good work, to the others that I'm like, you know what, I think maybe we're stretching a little bit to get that, 25th award this year or something where it's a little bit more pay for play than anything else. So I help them find balance too. I have two young sons, which has been another challenge with balancing a business. And when they ask me, Mom, what do you do for a living? Public relations does not come easy to a first grader. So instead, I really tell them I help people solve problems. So kind of back to your original question, I do like to think that I can consult with people and help them solve problems, even when it comes to maybe their own humility or their own imposter syndrome as business owners, and pump them up a bit to the right amount and to say, you are worthy of this, or let me tell you and give you some perspective where here's, everyone else that's doing something and talking about their good work. you're deserving too. And let's put you in the right place at the right time where it's not just about you, it's the impact you want to have on the communities. So I align a lot with not just nonprofits, I work with plenty of for-profits, but the one connection with all of them, I can usually find the cause centric at their heart, right? You know, they're even for a for-profit company, a very large corporation, I can say, but this is the heart of what you do. And sure, it's not a nonprofit, but it's still giving back to the community or impacting people in a much greater way.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Rick, I'm going to give you a shot at this too. Tell us what you struggle with as you're growing your companies to keep that balance we've been talking about.
You know, I was chatting with a business coach, and he said something very impactful to me years ago, and it was, Rick, do what only you can do, and the rest I want you to contract out. So at the time, I was trying to do everything. I was trying to do my own accounting. And let me tell you, I'm a horrible accountant. So I was trying to do audits and GST remittances and a whole bunch of other things. And it just became too much. And I think what I started to do was identify the fact that I'm not good at bookkeeping my own business. Stephanie is a great public relations person. So I started to subcontract out public relations work to people that know it better. And I just started to become a facilitator. And I think that's when I really found my true calling and was able to do a variety of different things. Was really getting into, like, I love creating messaging. I love doing radio broadcast commercials. I love doing shows, and I found my sweet spot. And after a while, when I got into being able to facilitate, and off the top, we talked about the abdication delegation. And when I became a better facilitator leader for a lot of these things, I was able to dive into teaching a college class. I was able to dive into creating fundraisers on the side. And all these things helped build a brand that I was able to, again, build even more network. So I think that the key for me and my struggle has always been, well, I should probably do that because I should know how to do that. And again, Travis, a little bit against the grain here. I think people have to learn to do those things and then step back. And again, I'll never be as good as Stephanie at public relations. I'll never be as good as you as writing a book, but I'll be able to find you and be able to say, hey, I'd like to work with you because you're great at this category and I'm not. So I want to just, and I think pushing my empire forward, that's the only way for me to do that, is to find these people, great people like you, that help me build what I want to build. So I think that business coach had no idea what he was giving me, but it was a real gem.
Well, you know, quite honestly, basically listening to what you've said, you might have been in that, you know, do it all capacity for a little while, right? And he helped you at least come up the ladder and out of that spot, which obviously you're grateful for. And great advice on this. I've had that same idea. Let me figure it out first. Let me figure out what's going on here and then delegate it. And then I got to a spot in my business where I didn't have time to figure things out anymore. I'm like, well, I can only stay in what I call my work sweet spot, which I'm going to get to in the how-tos after the show here. And I'm going to talk through that. But I absolutely agree. Once you figure out what your sweet spot is, staying there is super important. Because if you don't, you can easily, like, it's what is it, the shiny object syndrome, you know, and you're gone. We're gone. Distraction after distraction. I mean, it would be super fun. And I know I've played around with this over the weekend when we did some AI fun. There's a company called MyHeritage, and they allow you to upload some pictures, and they'll take them and they'll make you into this awesome muscular Roman soldier or this incredibly good looking Viking, you know, captain or whatever it is. And it's been fun to be like, man, that's how I would look if someone really, you know, made me look amazing. And as I walk through, like, it's super fun to play with those things and get caught up. But you know, how to use that for business. I know AI, it's super exciting and complicated, and I have no idea what I'm getting into, but I think we're all kind of there too. Like, we could spend hours trying to figure that out. Or you could hire an expert who does it really well and utilize them. So when, kind of bringing this back to you, Rick, when do you decide to go and try it first and then hand it off versus just hire someone else who already has a track record and saves you that time of figuring it out? Or do you just stay with that idea of trying to figure it out first?
Well, I think the key is find out what you can do, and stay in that sweet spot. Like I said, I realized very quickly bookkeeping is not my strong suit, never has, never will be. And also, I think I found those when I started to really enjoy the creativity part. Like, I run a marketing agency, and I found when I started to subcontract too much work, I got away from the reason why I even started a marketing agency, which is to build these great messages, propel people forward, and that was fun for me. And so when I'm enjoying myself during the day, that's when I know I have to stay in that sweet spot, and the rest can just go away. And again, I had to reach a certain level of resources where I was able to hire people, good people. Because the other thing that I think a lot of people forget is good people like Stephanie, or good people like you, Travis, you cost money. So I'm not going to try and grind you into dust. I never approach a contractor by saying, okay, I'm going to be the only one winning. I need you to win too, so you feel good about doing work for me. And I think that's the other thing is, I'm mentoring a 19-year-old who came to me and says, Rick, I want to do what you do. And I said, well, I'm 52. It took me a long time to get here. You just see the fun stuff, the golfing and the hockey and all this other stuff I get to do. You don't see the work I do, because sometimes, I'm sure Stephanie feels this, when you work half days, there's those half days, which is 12 hours. And those come up every now and then, but you have to get the work done. If I'm going to run my own companies, I have to get the work done. I can't step back from that. So I know this show is called Balanced Growth. I get that. But there's times when you just have to put the work in. I have to be a husband. I have to be a father. Yeah. But I still have to get my work done.
Rick, I think this is the point of this hustle mentality. If it's 100% hustle all the time, if you're working half days, 7 days a week, you will burn out, right? And I have a mantra that I go by, and that's, if all you're doing is putting out fires, eventually you're going to burn out. And I think this is the important part. Like, if there's a deadline, if there's no once in a while, a season even, where you've got a week where you've got some really big things and you've got to work late, that's part of the balance, isn't it? In life, I like to look at it and say there's really 10 areas of life, and I break them all down. They're all important. Work is important. And there are times and seasons where you may need to hustle a little bit more. But if it's all hustle until you make your first million or billion or whatever it is, you're going to neglect relationships, health, and everything along the way. So I want to talk to you guys about this. Because I'm with you, Rick. It's kind of the idea that I talked about earlier. Is people tend to see where you're at now. They don't know the Rick when he was 25. And if you went back, you'd be like, I don't want to be that guy anyway. Like, I learned things, I grew, and I'm a better person now. Hopefully, right? We cross our fingers on that we're learning and growing. But it's this hustle mentality that pulls us away from our health. Stephanie, I'm going to come back to you. I know you like to work out. I know that's important to you. How does working out, how does staying fit and taking care of your body mentally, physically, how does that equate to your business? What does that do for you?
Absolutely. And so I think it was over Christmas break when my two kids were home and I was off my normal schedule, and I really was not feeling myself. I knew I wasn't sick, but I almost felt that same fatigue and level of illness. And I had to reflect and say, you know what? I'm not my best self right now because of a couple key reasons. One of which is I wasn't getting my daily, my workouts, because it's not just aesthetics, getting strong or anything like that. It really is a time that's carved out for me that if I can't give myself that 40 minutes, that hour a day, I am not going to be able to give anyone else kind of from a full cup, so to speak. So I've really become unapologetically protective over certain elements of my schedule, certain elements of my daily routine, where I'll say, this is when I'm my best self. Stephanie is her best self when, and there's only a couple key kind of criteria that I have to meet in a day. Nothing ridiculous. I don't need like absurd routines or structures, because I have to be flexible as well. But I was like, I know when I work out in a day, or I know when I do a little bit of journaling in a day, I'm more creative. I am more productive. So I can work even less hours, but I can be more productive in those hours, to get that same done. So working out's important. I feel like it helps unlock my creativity. Better yet is when I can get outside in nature, especially if I can be near water. That is when I'm my best self. And it took me years to realize that I could actually start to feel the same elements of being sick if I did not do those certain things. And I would be like, well, I just got to work through it. I got to work harder. And it would make me then that much more sicker in my job. And I just really wasn't doing anything effectively.
So good. We've got about 6 feet of water in our neighborhoods. It's all been pushed up. It's in the form of ice now and snow. So I get a lot of that around here, Stephanie, but I'm with you. I grew up in Southern California where, the ocean, just the rhythmic waves. I get the valleys and the mountains up here with their rivers and lakes. And, my wife and I, we try to get every February out of the state of Utah and to either to Florida, Mexico, some Central American country. We went to Costa Rica this last month. And yeah, like coming back, it was a little bit difficult to situate here in the snow. But man, that really helped us. That really helped our mental state, our physical state. So I love that. Appreciate you bringing that up. Rick, I know you're active too. You're involved in sports. You do a lot of fun things, hockey among one of the things you do. Tell us, how does having these hobbies, having sports, interacting, exercising there, how does that help you have better balance?
I think the key was, again, going back to a person who came into my life, and she talked about, what are the 3 most important things in your life? And I said, well, my family's very important. My friends are very important, and my work is very important. She said, well, Rick, health actually should trump all of those things, because she said, if you are sick or you can't do your job, obviously that creates an issue. You can't look after your friends, you can't look after your family if your health suffers. So it brought it home to me very quickly that activity needed to be a part of my work week. And actually, you have to schedule it in, and I know I have to do that. But I find all of those things help me do everything I'm allowed to do. And I mean, you talked about struggles and guilt. I have still to this day, and I hate to admit this on the show, but I have guilt about working out and spending an hour and a half going to the gym or playing golf or playing hockey or doing any of these things. And I just picked up pickleball. Love that game.
There you go.
But I think for me, it's to get beyond that and realize that those 3 pillars of my life, I can't look after those unless I actually look after myself. So when I have friends who suffer from the same guilt that I do, I talk about the airplane analogy, which is when the oxygen mask drops down, you put it on your face first so you can help your loved ones. And I think that's the key in all of this is looking after me so I can look after my loved ones.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I love those concepts there. We talk about airplane concepts throughout the book as well. Because a lot of times, my dad, he was a pilot and he taught me how to fly, and he was an inspiration for me in balance. And I don't think he really knew it. He just lived it. He just really tried to have balance and showed up to all my soccer games and coached me as a kid. Just was really a great family man. But one lesson that will always stick with me is we were flying. We took off in his Cessna. He flew up from California, said hi to me, and was like, hey, let's go fly. So I went flying with him. And as we're taking off and charting the course, he's got his maps out. And he's like, do you know where we're going? I'm like, not really, but I kind of know where, oh, that looks like Park City down there. And there's Salt Lake. And as we were circling back to Utah County, He's like, Trav, we're actually off track, on this map, probably more than 90% of the time. And even in commercial jets, like they can put on the autopilot, and that'll really help them. The tools and technology they have helps them. But he said, in this little plane, like, it's just constant course correction. We pick our flight plan, we try to stick with it, we find the destinations along the way, and we reach our goal when we return, right? Or when we land. And he's like, any landing is a good landing, by the way. So every time, even if it's bumpy landing on every flight I've ever been on, I always just think any landing is a good landing. And, it's reaching the destination, reaching our goals. And Rick, I'm a goal person, absolutely a goal person. So I love that you brought this up a while ago. But kind of coming full circle on this, that balance is that recentering. It's as you're growing to stay focused, putting that face mask on as needed to remind yourself that you need to take care of you. We just have a few minutes to talk about relationships, because I have found, yes, it's important to take care of you. And that's typically one of our highest priorities, our physical, mental, spiritual health. These tend to be the highest when I ask people to rate them. But family, spouse, those relationships, even close friend relationships, are really high on the list, if not sometimes higher, as depending on how we rank them. And I don't rank them for people. I'm not the Dave Ramsey of values. Okay. I let people rank their own values and priorities. But I'm curious, how has being married, Stephanie, having children, how has that helped you to have balance? Let's talk about that.
Sure. Well, first, I should share that I'm an introvert. And whenever I had children, and also when COVID hit, and I had everyone at home with me, including my husband. So he's an entrepreneur as well, completely separate business. He now has a home office in our home on a completely separate floor. I had to really understand what balance was going to look like in this new chapter of life. I felt like everyone was getting a piece of me. My energy was constantly being depleted before I could even attempt to get to 1% charged. So I had to start drawing boundaries, is really where it comes into it. And it sounds harsh in my mind. And I had to get over that guilt. I know we've talked about the word guilt a lot as a business owner, of setting boundaries in my own life and relationships, knowing that I do need alone time. I do need solitude, probably more than the average person. But I'm also a wife, a mother, and in a job where a lot of people need me a lot of hours of the day. So I had to set boundaries. I had to be communicative. I had to communicate early and often with my needs of saying, I just need some time, or here's something that I would enjoy doing with the family. So really, it's those boundaries piece. But the other one I want to talk about with relationships too is, although I'm a business owner interfacing with 35 plus clients every given month, that's how many people could be in my inbox at any time needing something from me, that it's still really lonely. And when you're a business owner, entrepreneur for however many years, even if you have employees, you'll find that the unique position you fill within your business or within your family or anywhere else, sometimes there's really just not that counterpart, that mentor to talk to. So I found a lot of great value in finding a mentor. Having a really supportive spouse. I'll give him a shout out, because I don't think I could do what I do without someone as supportive and understanding as he is. Really, not even a 50-50 partner. It's 100% from both of us. And then, of course, also finding just those key mentors and other people in my life, usually who are maybe that one chapter ahead of me in entrepreneurship, that I can look to and say, have you ever dealt with something like this? And they can kind of pour into me. And you said course correct. Sometimes it is a little bit of that tough love of saying, I hear what you're saying, Stephanie, but have you heard it this way? Or do you think that maybe you're coming across this way? I have a lot of good people in my life who love me dearly, but also know that I can be an extremist, and who can pour back into me and say, maybe you need to course correct. Maybe you're the problem. Hi, it's me. I'm the problem. So I've learned kind of those key elements, and I'm constantly learning as I go.
Oh, what a great example. I appreciate you bringing these things up. I know Rick kind of brought up the guilt thing too about working out. I didn't come back to that, but you brought it up again about, hey, setting boundaries, which is crucial. It's actually one of my how-tos I'll get to at the end here. But this is incredibly important that you set those boundaries. And I think imposter syndrome and guilt, there's they're kind of cousins, aren't they? Or at least they may be siblings, where they go hand in hand of, some people have called me out even on social media, like, how do you take 16 weeks off? Like, you should be there for your team. And they kind of try to use guilt to keep me in their idea of success and lifestyle. And I thought, no, this is what I want. Whatever you want is fine. But that guilt doesn't apply to me, and I'm not going to take it from other people. But I could see how if I'm leaving a bunch and my team's like, they're not on board and they don't understand the vision, that they would have a problem. The great thing is my team works a 4-day week. They work 30 hours. I give them tons of flexibility, and it's fantastic to work with them. And I think they understand the vision. So that's good. And I appreciate you bringing this up, Stephanie, about those boundaries, because you're a working mom, you have kids, you have a very supportive spouse, which I believe is a huge key for getting past being a personal developer and becoming a balanced achiever, is someone that has a supportive spouse and family. They are the reason that most people have balance. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you for that.
The one thing I will add too, just to close the loop on guilt, is no one can make you feel guilty without your consent. I need that written somewhere, like in every room of my house. And so every day I'm like, no one can make me feel guilty without my consent. Usually I'm the one inflicting it. So I have to just keep telling myself, stop giving consent.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do it. You can just take things at face value and let it roll.
I love it. So good. Yeah. We need to have that all over the place, right? And remember that daily. And, the other thing that comes down to it too, that imposter syndrome, that sister, the brother, the cousin that is, a lot of times I think it is just recognizing that you are the expert. As Rick was bringing this up, like, you're the expert with PR. I'm the expert with helping people with balanced growth. Understand that most other people don't get what you know. And you're already 10 times probably further than they are in a certain specific profession than they are. And it's okay to share. And it's okay that, if they don't agree with you, you don't have to be guilty or have those kinds of issues. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Rick, I'm going to bring you to this conversation as well. You talked about guilt a little bit. You talked about, I want to kind of follow up with that. And as we've been talking about with Stephanie about this conversation of imposter syndrome, but more importantly, let's touch on, how your family has helped you to be supportive of your businesses and keep the balance that you enjoy. Let's talk about that. How has that affected you?
I think the biggest thing is I learned from a friend of mine. He's a chief of staff at the hospital. And I said, how do you keep your marriage so, like, I see him with his wife and they're just a great couple. And he says, we have moments during the day. We have the morning moment and then we have the evening moment. And he said, and him and his wife enjoy cigars. And he says, we have a cigar out in the patio and we connect during the day. And he says, no matter what I have going on in my life, I need to make sure I'm there for that moment. And I think it taught me a lot about connection moments. We have technology and we have these phones, these stupid phones. And I find with my kids, it's very important that I'm also being diligent with my time with them. So whenever I can, I get the most out of these moments when I put my phone down and I'm in the moment with my child or with my wife. And I'm not trying to do a whole bunch of different things, because I find as entrepreneurs, we tend to try and do a whole bunch of things, sometimes not very well. And one is being in the moment, being in that, like, actually being like Oprah and just really being connected to that person. And I think if people could just learn that whole, like, share that, don't get distracted, just stay in the moment with that person, you are going to get so much more out of your family, out of your relationships, out of your life, if you get these connections and really make sure that you put the right onus on these connections. And I think I'm still learning. I'm not there yet. I'm certainly, it's a work in progress, as they say, but I really try and be involved. And when my wife tells me about her day, I'm in it with her. I'm not thinking about the 100 things I need to do that day. I'm actually going, okay, and tell me more about that. What else happened to your day, Jennifer? And it's just, it actually gives me goosebumps when I think about these moments, because they're you just can't squander them.
Yeah, so great. Being present is a skill. It's an ability and a skill that we can learn, because, especially as business owners, a lot of us are trying in our minds, suppress that do it all. Like the do it all might be in there really far down, like suppress it and stay present. Is just as important to talk about the flip side too, of like, hey, being present with your family, super important. I post about that nonstop on social, and I'm trying to be a really good example of that. But on the other side, it's also important that you keep those boundaries, and as Stephanie was talking about, boundaries with family. Listen, we homeschool, we have 7 children. And at one point, I was literally working out of my closet at home with our kids. Like, I can't just like send our kids off to school, and I could ask my wife to take them outside or something like that. But I've been interviewed on podcasts where I'm like, okay, everybody be quiet, Dad's on the podcast, here we go. It's like he's going live in 5, 4, and Mom's like keeping everybody quiet. Okay, I'm done. Yay! Like they could run around and bang on the piano, but like those boundaries are super important, especially working from home. And like it's legit. I remember just the other day seeing that interview of the guy being interviewed on some kind of, I think it was like CNN or something, and the kids running in, and and then
he's trying to struggle, but
grabs him, and he got destroyed on either side. Like, shame on him for not being a good dad, and so good for him to stay the course. Like, it didn't matter. He got barbecued. But I think it's important to know you've got to have those boundaries on either way to be present at work and present at home. And I had a mentor who said, just be present wherever you're at. Wherever you're at, be present. One of my clients struggled with this so bad. He loved soccer, and he'd have the TV screen behind his office so he could be working on financial plans and watch the game, and he's like, yay, things are going. But then he took his phone to his first World Cup game. And what was he doing watching his favorite team play in a World Cup game? He's checking his email. Oh my goodness. Like, pay thousands of dollars. This is like a once in a lifetime experience. But how often do we do that? I know we all struggle with it. I appreciate you guys today. If there was one piece of advice, you've given some gold nuggets throughout here, and your time's valuable. So I thank you. I'm going to get to my how-tos right after. You're welcome to stick around and listen. But if there's one piece of advice, Stephanie, that we've talked about having better balanced growth, what would it be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was going to go a couple different ways, but where this last segment, just the conversation went, it hit a heartstring with me, and it reminded me of an excerpt that I read in a recent book. And so if you don't mind, it's just real quick.
Sure.
It's from the book called The Folded Clock, a diary. And it says, today I spun tops with my son. We did this for 6 hours straight. So much of the pleasure of hanging out with children is successfully losing yourself, if only for a minute or two, in the activity with which you're both engaged. Suddenly, I am drawing a shoe that makes us both happy. The cogs of the day smoothly and quickly turn. Once I finish the shoe, however, I'm back to wondering, how can this day mostly involve my waiting for it to be over? Yet when the day has ended, my child will be older and I will be nearer to dead. Why should I wish for this to happen any sooner than it already will? And I think that kind of summarizes how I feel with motherhood and balancing and jobs. I'll be with my kids and checking my email, thinking about this next thing I have to do. And the reality is when that moment passes, I lose that moment with them. And why would I wish that away? Then we're all just closer to the end. The end of what? So it's a good reminder. I don't do it well. I don't have any perfect advice, but I think the more you can surround yourself with good books, good people, good role models, that just to keep that the focus and continually to help you course correct again and again. Like you said, Travis, every day we're all those little planes just being toggled in the air with the breezes. And we have to always course correct.
Wonderfully said. Thank you, Stephanie. Rick, any last words of advice?
Yeah, I think it's really, if we're, let's say one window is your work and that's the east window, then you should have a west window, and that's your play. And I get to enjoy pickleball. I get to enjoy hockey. I get to enjoy, a variety of different things. because it's immersive. I forget about work. I forget about everything else. I just think about beating the other team. I'm a little bit competitive, not awful, but I just enjoy winning. I'm a very good loser because I lose a lot. But I find it's just transformative if I can dive into that west window as well as work hard and be in the east window. So for me, balance is about being able to really put 100% of your energies into that activity, and then 100% of your focus and energies into work. So that would be a perfect balanced life for me, is to be able to continue to do those things.
Love it. Thank you, guys. Thank you both for being here, for your advice. If, those of you who've been flies listening on the wall to these conversations, these have been some incredible conversations we've had. Great advice on how to avoid those pitfalls, what pitfalls you've experienced, what's working well for your businesses. And so thank you really for giving back to the entrepreneurism at large here. If you've liked this, please share, subscribe, leave us some great feedback, reviews, share it with someone who needs to hear about what we've been discussing today. Again, thank you, Stephanie and Rick, for being on the show.
Our pleasure. My pleasure.
Just to discuss now some how-tos. Really, there are three things that kind of went along with our conversation here today that I want to discuss. Some quick how-tos. Stephanie and Rick in our show here, as I've interviewed them, really touched on several of them. The first one is to have an ideal calendar. Have an ideal calendar for your work week so that every week you know where you're going to be at, where you're spending your time, what you're doing with your time, and that it really represents what you should be focusing on, which is tip number 2, your work sweet spot. Now, your work sweet spot should be your 3 to 5 activities that you should be spending 80 to 90% of your time every day in. Financial advisors, I kind of have helped lots of them, dozens of them, with this struggle. And so I know where most financial advisors should be spending their time. And quite honestly, about 25 to 30% business owners, financial advisors, of your time is spent in the work sweet spot. I've seen it as I've done literally hundreds of trainings with advisors and business owners on this. And so I know as a financial advisor, you should be, doing plans, working with clients, but a lot of times it's these other things. It's tech, it's networking, it's these other things that take you out of your work sweet spot. One of the best things I can tell you to do is, after you've created an ideal calendar for your week, if you want to work 40 hours, if you want to work 30 hours, whatever it is, set that up as an ideal and work towards it. And the best way you're going to do to get there is identify those 5 activities. What if you could get paid the most doing what you love the most? It's going to be those 5. You put them together. I have a process that I explain in Achieving Balance book that you can pick up and run with even more. The third concept here is setting boundaries. Now, Stephanie, our previous guest on the Balanced Growth Show, she talked about boundaries a lot, and we got into this discussion. But what are those boundaries? I like to look at boundaries as when I was working from home in a virtual capacity, when I had my little closet office, and I thought, gee, what can I do? I don't even have a lock on this door. What do I do to keep my 7 sweet, loving children out of my office, and so that I can work hard so that when I'm done, I can be with them, to be present? Well, I consider my workspace, whether that's at home in my home office or here at this office that I rent and that I use for my podcasting studio. What do? Well, I create boundaries like a castle. I was taught by a great mentor who said, hey, your workspace, it's like a castle. You have to build a castle around your location, right? And that is where you work. But that's not it. If a castle left unprotected, any other territory could come in, take it, destroy it, wipe you out, take your people, and move on, right? I descend from Viking ancestors, Celtics, who have fought in battle. They know that that's super important. So what did they do? They put their castle up on a hill. They put it where they could view other things that are coming, ships that are coming, typically next to a river or a port where they could get away if needed, if they got backed in on the land. So they weren't landlocked. So, that's where do you set up your time? Where do you set up your office? How are you positioning yourself? In addition, you have a great big wall that's built around. What are the walls that you build? Well, it might be your work hours. These are the times that I'm working. This is where I'm working. Then you have a drawbridge and you have soldiers. Rick, who was on our show, Bounce Growth Show, just a little bit ago, discussed this idea of delegation and really training your people, not just abdicating, but training and following up with this training in order to delegate. Well, those are your soldiers. Those are the people who are guarding the gates. Those are the ones who are guarding the drawbridge, which you have a moat around your castle to protect you, or maybe again a cliff or some water to keep you safe. I suggest you do the same thing with your work time. Keep your boundaries, and then build personal time in around your castle to make sure that that keeps you focused and keeps you happy, healthy, building relationships, and not just get sucked into work all day, every day, but Travis, I love it. That's okay. You can love other things too, because that's important for your life, your health, your relationships, the things that you really matter the most to you. This is our how-to for today. I'm signing off. Dr. Travis Perry with the Balanced Growth Show. Thank you for being a part, everyone who's listened, who's been a part, we've been able to interview. And if you like this, again, like, share, subscribe, send it to someone who needs it. I will end with this one quote. And it is, you need to work in your sweet spot. That's it. If you remember one thing from today, find that sweet spot, work in it, really emphasize where those activities are for you and delegate the rest, delete it, automate it, and set up those boundaries so that you can perform at your highest. Again, I'm signing off. Dr. Travis Perry here with the Balanced Growth